Amen. Well, let's continue on. Looks like we're nearing the end of book 11 here. Where did you guys start?
Introduction.
No,
We started a little bit.
This run, we started in
9, 11 or something.
Oh, you mean
You probably
this book?
read the introduction.
We
I know we started by reading the introduction to the other book.
Oh yeah.
And then
that's
we
true.
skipped to 9, 10.
Really, I enjoyed the
Well, wait.
introduction to this book too.
Yeah, well, for some people we skipped to 19. I think we had actually started
Yeah, we read
at
from
the
the
beginning.
beginning.
I mean, that doesn't
A
matter.
long
Like,
time ago.
we started at the beginning.
Yeah, this current session, though, has only been to 9.
Yeah.
And did Emmanuel say why he started where he did? Do you guys remember that?
That's where we left off.
From when?
That's what I was just saying. Yeah, we started from the beginning, like,
A few years ago.
because before we were going through the Bible,
You were doing this?
yeah.
I gotcha. Because I know that he was going through it with Noah even a couple years before that.
And then I joined in, and then we kind of went around.
Nice. Good. Well, that's why Noah's so helpful to us, because he's been through it a couple times.
I didn't even know I was up.
What's that?
I didn't even know I was up.
Oh, stop it. Stop it. Okay, where are we in our reading pattern here? This is a short one, so I don't know if we'll go through this one quickly and get to the next one, because the next one is quite involved. That's a really good one too.
I read the
Yeah, go ahead.
one, the 11:25, right?
Mm-hmm.
Zlu dispatched Zagao to serve as the steward of the G family stronghold of B. The master remarked, "You are harming another man's son." Zulu replied, "There are people there for him to govern, and altars to the soil and grain for him to maintain. We must think that it is only by reading books. Why must we think that it is only by reading books that one can be considered learned? She. The master answered, "It is for precisely this reason that I despise those who are glib." What is glib?
Somebody look up glib for us.
I got you.
It's kind of like smug.
Of words where the person speaking fluent and what? She was careful not to let the answer sound too glib.
Do you have a definition?
It says of words or the person speaking them, fluent and voluble, but insecure and shallow. I just like that's such a weird.
Insincere and shallow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, insincere.
Like presumptuous almost.
Thoughtless. Insincerity. Too much talking. Mostly insincere. And I think insincere and thoughtless are probably the best ways to define glib. So it's kind of like you're just speaking without thinking about what you were about to say. Interesting, huh? All right, Benji. Read the commentary.
B was the stronghold of the G family, and thus the base of their personal power, where the virtuous, is it?
Virtuous.
You're right,
Yeah.
virtuous.
Min Zikwan declines the position of steward. Zulu's point seems to be that Zagao, although young and not particularly bright or well educated, can learn on the job through practical experience. and based on 1.7, we might expect Confucius to agree with him. Confucius' rebuke can be understood in various ways. Most commentators argue that the book learning is crucial to someone aspiring to take up an important official position. A view supported by a passage from the exoteric commentary. Duke I asked Zixia, is it necessary to first learn before it is possible to bring peace to the state and protect the people? Zixia replied, there has never been one who, without first learning, was able to bring peace to the state and protect the people. Wei Li also remarks that the pertinence of Zulu's remark consists of the fact that he knows in the master's teeth.
He throws.
That he throws in the master's teeth a favorite Confucian maxim. Probably the point here is that Zulu is doing something that he knows at some level is wrong, pulling an inexperienced young man away from his studies and throwing him into a situation that is over his head, which will surely harm both the young man and the people under his rule. But trying to defend his behavior by citing a Confucian maxim out of context, though clever, such a behavior is more morally despicable in Confucius' eyes.
Interesting. So again, we have this character, Zulu, who is quite rash. So let's think for a moment about where the different scenarios and situations in which Zulu has found himself in much of our reading. You know, there's the times of, we just recently read, when, you know, Confucius and his entourage was taken because they thought he was someone else, right? And he wanted to get out there and show somebody something, right? And then even, what?
I don't know.
Oh, I just thought you were talking about something specific. And then, anybody remember Zulu's death? What that scenario was? Go ahead, Mel.
I believe he was a part of some siege on some township, and then he challenged someone who I think at the time was on a wall. He at the bottom, and he was basically looking for a fair duel, and began to scale the wall and was killed in the process in a pretty violent way and pretty tragic way because of how unfair it was, because the soldier, I think, I don't remember exactly what the dialogue was between the two of them, but
He asked if he was a gentleman or a soldier, and he said, I'm a soldier. So he let him fall to the ground and was injured. And then the guy came to strike the fatal blow. But you see, the rashness there was he was all full of his, you know, vigor and passion and anger and, you know, in a sense, you know, his lust for battle. You know, to be. It wasn't so much that Zulu, I think, was wanting to be a great person in himself and to be known to be as such. It's the way that he processed decisions in his mind. And so this is another example of Zulu's, that's the glib, like it's thoughtless. You're not really thinking things through. And so I have more to say, but I want you guys to put input on what you're seeing here.
So, I think I'm understanding it rightly, but is Confucius agreeing with the fact that this young man should be put in this position, or is he's against?
He's not. So in the commentary, there's this additional context given that part of what Zulu is referring to is that was partially referring to one of Confucius' statements of wisdom, basically that being, and we'd have to look at it for me to know how exactly he put it, but the basics are that it's good for someone to put into practice things, that that's a part of learning, which would be true. But see, now we have the second hand or the third hand perspective of making a decision that would put not just one person at risk, but an entire city at risk. So, this ties back into the reality that one, our lives are not our own, regardless of our position, practice, or appointment, and that what we do is not only consequential to ourselves. So there's a consequence to Min Zuquan. Okay, there is, Zigao. There's a consequence to Zigao. There's a consequence to Zigao's family, and there's a consequence to those over or among whom he was appointed. So that's a lot of spheres of consequence. And, obviously it's focusing back on Zulu in the way that he makes decisions, the way that he thinks about even how to make decisions. Did that perspective change what you were wanting to talk about?
Well, yeah, I was just wondering, if Confucius was prompting that, it is best to learn through experience. I mean, obviously, still, knowledge and books and whatever is, I guess, still helpful, but it's not like the best way to learn, even in the situation of coming into a royal position or official position that you're talking about. So, I guess I'm just trying to understand what the right way would be, because there's this way that Zulu has posed, and then he comes against it saying that that's not because obviously it's going to affect more people than just inside.
And some of the key to understanding what's going on here is to understand the relationship between Confucius and Zulu. Not just the fact that Zulu is Confucius' disciple, but that Confucius as his master, as one who is in essence the overseer and the one who has insight into his life, because that's the relationship that was given or appointed there. Then Confucius knows Zulu's tendencies. He can see with clarity that he has not thought this through. Now, as it pertains to wisdom, and maybe Confucius' own proverb to say that you learn through experience, the answer in much of wisdom is not about yes or no. You see, we would divide this into what was right or wrong, black or white, yes or no. Should you do it? Should you learn that way, or should you not? And the answer is yes and no. Why? Because, first of all, it's not a black and white. It matters who you are, what your experience is, how you're approaching it. Those determine how that works. And so Confucius can clearly see he's not applying that wisdom. Not in the situation he's been put in his appointment of this young man, nor in his own assessment of that young man's life and his capability, not just his capability to tell people what to do, but to be able to think wisely and be someone who would be a proper, righteous candidate for such an appointment in the midst of the people. And so I'm glad you're thinking of it that way, because we need to expose the way that we process rights and wrongs. In life, there are many mistakes, or maybe certain ways that things can be done one way or another that can be perceived to be right or wrong, black or white. But what matters more is how we the process by which we came to the conclusion that we're at. And that's what Confucius is speaking of. And what he's basically saying is, you didn't really think about this at all. It's obvious to me that you did not apply. That's the glibness. You're being thoughtless about how you approached this appointment. And then you're trying to support your view with some lightweight usage of a proverb that you clearly didn't understand in the right context, because you don't know me. So there's also an unveiling of the lack of understanding that Zulu has of the way that Confucius looks at things like this, at others' lives, at appointments, those kinds of things. Who else has some thoughts? Noah, anything to add?
I was looking for an Analect that had inspired some thoughts about the timeliness of things, because that seemed to be a very remarkable.
Please continue your conversation. I'm going to take a call.
Okay. So something that's always impressed me about Confucius, whether it's something he's directly discussed or that's evident from his behavior, is the wisdom he has of the timing of things. There seems to be some almost this intuition that Confucius carries as an experienced, or I guess as many people consider him, a wise person, in which he knows when to do the right thing and whom to do it with. There's like this, there's not a method he carries per se, or some formula he applies to his circumstances, but there's a relational and even a practical wisdom that he has developed, and that he's in many ways passing on to his disciples through experiences like what Zulu experienced here, by which they come to understand that wisdom of timeliness. And that's obviously the point of concern here in this Analect, is Zulu was not merely being impetuous and rash, as we often describe him, but there was something that was that he was not fully understanding, obviously, because this was not just him succumbing to his natural way of making decisions, but he was actually trying to do something that he probably thought that would be something that would impress Confucius, because he obviously didn't just quote a Confucian maxim to spite Confucius. He wasn't bitter against his master. There was actually a genuine there's actually a genuine thought on Zulu's part to be doing something that the master would do in his place. But the master obviously upset his confidence in himself and his understanding of his master's way when he said, "You're harming another man's son. You're actually not doing it in a timely way." And I did come across something that the master told Zulu directly back in book 2, chapter 17. He said, he addressed Zulu directly, saying, Zulu, remark well what I am about to teach you. This is wisdom, to recognize what you know as what you know, and recognize what you do not know as what you do not know. That's pretty straightforward. But again, Zulu is a pretty straightforward guy himself. So that seems very simplistic, but there's actually a profound truth to what Confucius said there, because what he addressed in Zulu was not necessarily that deficiency that we often address in Zulu, which is his impetuousness. But in this case, Confucius is addressing another thing that Zulu does that is that's not an impetuousness of behavior, but an impetuousness of mind, and that Zulu forms or draws conclusions very, very quickly. I just referred back to 217, where Confucius addresses Zulu directly and says, Zulu, remark well what I am about to teach you. This is wisdom, to recognize what you know as what you know, and recognize what you do not know as what you do not know.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that one. That was good.
And so that's something that he is addressing once more in Zulu's behavior in 1125 here. Where I think you touched on a little bit yourself, but Zulu was not doing something. I think that Zulu was actually acting in a way that he thought would impress his master, because he thought he was putting his way or his principles into practice. Which is why I also would say, even though he might have done it with somewhat of an attitude, I don't even think he threw a Confucian maxim at Confucius despite him, but because there was a genuine confusion in what it meant.
And he thinks that that's the way to express wisdom.
Right.
But what Confucius is clarifying is, no, wisdom is not displayed or practiced or manifested in a life simply because you know a principle. It's something that has to affect the way that you think. And that is clearly not happening here. So he has all that he needs as it pertains to the principle, but it has not borne its fruit in him in the way that he makes decisions. This is super important for us to understand. Not only this is a wisdom of life that applies to us, to you, to whomever. I mean, you're a manager of a business. You have people under your care. The decisions that you make have that impact, not just in the cafe, but in the nature of what involves things in their life and the people that they're connected to. If you don't think that way, then you have not properly applied wisdom. Wisdom is not a tool that we pull out for our specific use. It's an operation that must be like grown up in and through us. Those things have to take root as a source of the way that we think, and then it can produce. So it's not a copy, a repetition of, a regurgitation of something that you heard before that's like Noah just mentioned, as if that's impressive to Confucius. Actually, he says, that doesn't impress me at all. There are lives at stake here. You seem to have forgot that. How could you possibly be so thoughtless? How could you possibly think that that's the way? The way. I'm reminded of, I think we've all seen most of The Chosen. And you remember Nicodemus, and that he was a teacher of the law and a teacher of wisdom. What does he say to Shmuel when in the parting I think at the end of the first season or something like that, or second season, I don't remember which one it is. But when Shmuel's gonna go make his formal inquiry in Jerusalem, and they have that private conversation, and Shmuel says, you know, I owe all this to you. I learned everything that I know from you. And what does Nicodemus say?
Like you haven't learned anything.
Yeah, please don't say that anything that you have is from me. You've learned nothing from me. But he had all the scriptures. He knew all the teachings. He was very meticulous about all the principles. But see, it broke his master's heart to know that the wisdom and the truth that he had sown into his young disciple had been so misappropriated.
It's interesting because it goes, I mean, in that case, it's just wisdom being taken as knowledge, you know, just head knowledge, almost to store, and it's pleasing to the mind, you know, but it really doesn't bear any fruit in your life, and it doesn't affect, especially what sticks out to me is wisdom affecting the way that you think, and even how that ties in relationally is, I still haven't fully worked that out, but I was just thinking about that. Because it really does have to work itself out in all the fruits of your life, or in all the avenues of your life, right?
Yeah, I think comparing wisdom to love and truth, actually, in a way that, because I know I had a conversation with Emmanuel probably a couple months ago, but we were talking about truth and saying that truth can't really be defined in words. It's I was thinking about it and made it a comparison to like the right way a son should relate to his father. That is truth. Like it's not something we can like say, because we made the differentiation between facts, you know, and truth.
Mm-hmm.
But in the same way, I think in wisdom and even in love as well, it's not. I think mankind always tries to compare things to knowledge, because they try to explain what these things are. But at that point, it's just bringing it all back to knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. Trying to make it tangible. But I think even with wisdom here, it's not something that, I mean, I'm just repeating words, but it's not something that is like a tool, like you said. It's a in wisdom, it's like it's a way you're natured in. It's a way that you. But it goes beyond instinct, because it's a certain way that you're supposed to be natured in, almost like no, I don't know how to make a good illustration of that.
It's a flow.
Yeah.
There's a frequency that's like the flowing of a river. And so, you know, there's a lot of you guys have probably heard even myself or Emmanuel use this illustration before. He's used it with the garden. And I remember the first time that he did it with me in relation to a river. Sorry. And, you know, for those who maybe live in a city center far from nature, you know, they have access to water. They know what water is. They may know of a river, you know, in some distant land that is completely pristine and untouched by the influences of man's destructive and poisonous ways. And, that river may seem and sound to be so beautiful to them. Some don't even know about it. Some people just access the, whatever comes out of the faucet or whatever, but others may know of this. Maybe some have heard about it, but they don't believe it. So think about how you think about this river as a source of life. And there then are others that know of this place. I mean, you can go all the way to the detail. What about those who believe that it's there but have never been there? What about those who have come to the valley where the river is and they've heard its sound from a distance? That was something altogether new. What about those who have come and seen the river at the bottom of the valley and felt that, heard its power? What about those who have drawn near to its strength, to see the strength of the foam that is produced, and to smell and sense the moisture of the particles of water in the air? That's all a very different experience. They all relate to the same thing, but it's not the same experience. It's not the same essence and meaning. But what about the one who has touched the water and felt its crisp coolness? Not the same. What about the one who has waded in and partaken of that water, to taste its purity and cleanness, to feel its strength against their body? But there's still a greater experience yet. To release the control that you have and to be taken where the river goes, where you do not know. But you become one with its power, one with its flow, one with its destiny. Those are very, very different experiences. The comparisons are vast. I mean, there's a vast comparison even from knowing there is a river to really believing that there is one. But how much more vast is the difference between one whose life has become one with its cleansing power, its flow, and its destiny to go to the place that it was ordained to go? That's a powerful illustration of not only the life of God, but the activation and the flow and the movement of the wisdom of God, and even how we partake of it, how we think about it. And I would say wisdom is useless to the one who is not fully given to its flow. It is otherwise only some other experience that doesn't really take you to the destiny of its fulfillment.
Yeah, I guess we kind of grasp onto even the idea of wisdom sometimes and kind of let it stop there. Almost like we, like you were saying, use it as a tool. But we're only partaking in such a small little corner of it, is what it feels like. It's just like, I think something that was brought up in Spiritual Progress, which stuck with me, is tangible delights. Stuff that pleases your mind to think about, or even that and just knowledge that you store, and then you let it in there, and that's kind of almost, that's the finish line, that is completion, that's fulfillment. And we stop there. And that's what I even think of with school and even the church that I grew up in, is it stops there. It stops at knowledge, it stops at the tangible delights, and we never really press any further.
So I hope in your own minds, and especially in the minds of those of my generation and before, we can really better understand and completely redefine what it is to be educated. True education is leading someone to the river and giving them the opportunity to become one with its power and flow. That's life education. That's the introduction to and the initiation of. To think of in the context of the illustration that I gave about the river, where the will comes into play, where desire comes into play. Some of those fundamental things about the human existence. That is also the depth of the place from which your way of life or your culture, the culture that you have subscribed to, applied yourself to, comes from. And honestly, the greatest test of the will comes in the deepest place of fulfillment and participation with, becoming one with that flow and that power. Because in the midst of the river, you still have to release your touch and be carried by its power. That's an act of the will. Who's crossed a river before? On foot. So you know what I'm talking about. Benji, you know? Yeah?
Yes, you have.
Yeah?
I watched you do it.
Okay. Now I'm going to take you out into the L walk.
Let's go.
That's a river.
You will experience. So I got a lot of experience like that as a young person. One of our used to be annual family trips from my dad's side of the family was a place that we would go to called the Rio Frio. Yeah. The freezing river. And it was cold. That was a cold river. But that was actually the name of the river. And we would stay at a place called Crider's Cabins. And we would do tubing for several days. So, you'd get on a bunch of tubes and you would get in a truck or a bus and you'd stack all your tubes up on the top and go up to the very a starting point, and then you would have your cars set down below so that you could get back to where you're going. And so you'd put in, and there were all kinds of waters, all different types of experiences in relation to what that river was going to do, where it was going to carry you, what depth it was at, where the currents were, where the dangerous places were. And, we learned that very young. And sometimes you learn in ways that are pretty scary. So the first time you go down that one little whitewater section and, the water at the bottom of that little fall catches the tube and it throws you over. And your tube stays right up at the top, but you might be running like a little piece of clothes in a wash machine underneath that waterfall. Life can become pretty disorienting at that point. Come up gasping and choking for air. But, there's one thing that you can't do. You cannot control that river. And sometimes your resistance to it is the thing that can cause you the most harm. So I learned too that in swimming in highly in fast moving water, your tendency is to want to go straight to the shore where you're looking, rather than to swim in the direction you need to go, but with the flow of the river. So your mind is always resisting it. because you see a point that you're trying to get to, and the power of the river is unstoppable. But you're trying to go to the point that you were, and in order to get to that place, you would have to be going against the flow, even if you were to go straight across. So you have to learn to release that fear and be taken and move in a certain way in the river. I'm just talking about the familiarity of the force of the river. You know, when my boys and I got into the Elwha, I mean, you can wade up to pretty close to your waistline, just below your waistline, in a certain force of water and flow of water. But once your torso hits the water, the power of that water dramatically changes because of the there's the resistance that your body puts against the water. And it, I remember when we did that just a few years ago. It got so powerful at some points. I had to remind myself not to panic, because you feel like you're not going to be able to do that. So probably, I don't know when it was just before we moved from Georgetown, California. We went down to, we were living in a mountainous area that was a giant river valley, the American River. And remember when we went out with the Stovall's? Do you guys remember that, or are you too young? But their daughters were teenagers, a little younger than these guys, and are now. And that was a big river, and it had some depths. And interestingly, the most forceful part of the current was not at the surface. It was just below the surface of the water. But it could hold you. And so one of my nieces got caught in the current and couldn't get out. I had to swim across the river and push her to the other side, and then swim her back, because she couldn't do that. But I remember doing that. That was scary, because you're dealing with a force that you cannot control. And so truth and wisdom are that kind of force. You can't change them. You can't go against truth.